Welcome to the Breaking News Bears podcast. I'm your host, Chris Capone, joined alongside my co-host once again, Evan Davis, and the World Series matchup is finally set. This Friday, October 25th, marks Game 1 of the 2024 World Series between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Yankees. Baseball's two biggest names meeting up in the World Series for the first time since 1981. Obviously, the two biggest names in baseball, just in the athletes, going against each other in Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. And what's sure to be a great series, and we will discuss how we got here. But first, Evan, I want to ask of you, what do you make of their opponents in their championship league series wins? What do you make of the Mets and the Guardians now that both of their seasons are over, short of the World Series?
Yeah, I mean, we could start with the Mets, who the Miracle Mets run is officially over, but just an incredible season from them overall. Towards the second half of the year, they were practically unbeatable. They were one of the best teams in baseball, and after an 0-5 start to the year, where it felt like this was just going to be a complete rebuild of a team, they end up making it to the National League Championship Series, forcing 6 games against the Los Angeles Dodgers, and just an incredible team overall that's going to look very, very different, next year. They have so many free agents that we don't know, who is coming back, but one thing is for certain of who is going to be back next year, and that's Mark Vientos, who had an incredible postseason, 5 home runs, 14 RBIs, who currently leads the postseason in RBIs. Just an incredible young talent that looks to be, the future of this team. And the Mets have the left side of their infield secured for a very long time in Francisco Lindor and now Mark Vientos.
I mean, yeah, you look at the incredible postseason that Vientos had, and you talk about the beginning of the year being, so down for the Mets. Before they traded Max Scherzer last year, they had Steve Cohen had a conversation with Scherzer and said, "Well, we're thinking more about 2026 to contend." And little did they know 2024 would end up being, their year to actually make it to the NLCS. And I wonder how some of these players that got, traded from the team last year, like Verlander and Scherzer, feel now that the Mets actually ended up competing the very next year right after. But yeah, we also talk about it, and this Mets team is just you talk about the sheer amount of free agents that this team has. Alonso, Minaya, Quintana, Severino, three of their three best starters are all going to be free agents this year, and that's a really huge question for them. And then obviously one of their star keys, cornerstones in their franchise that's been around since 2019, Pete Alonso, he's also likely, gonna test free agency and he could potentially leave. This Mets team could look so different in just a few months' time that you could go from the NLCS, and they already have one of the highest payrolls in baseball. Like I think they're already second or third in highest payroll.
They're number
They're
one.
number one. They're number one. And yeah, it's just insane that does Steve Cohen think, all right, well, we have to run it back at this point.
Well, yeah, and like that's the whole thing is like with the Juan Soto conversations, like how serious is Steve Cohen going to be in offering Soto what's probably going to be in the 550 to $600 million range, just with the way that MLB contracts are going. And Soto is arguably a top three player in baseball. You could mix and match whoever you want, but it's hard to put Soto down that much lower. And yeah, this Mets team, like you wonder what they're going to do. And based on the way Alonso was talking in his post-game interviews and just the vibes that he's been giving, it feels like the Mets aren't really his like solidified destination. He's just giving off the vibe, and like even his the way he's speaking in the tense that he's speaking in is saying like, yeah, I've enjoyed my time with the Mets, and kind of like reminiscing on, what has been a very, very good career in New York. But yeah, you mentioned like Minaya, Quintana, Severino, they're all free agents, and they're going to command a good amount of money. I don't see why Steve Cohen wouldn't entertain the opportunity to potentially re-sign these guys. But I mean, you just look at it, it's a lot of talent that's leaving. And for guys like Quintana and Sean Manaea, like just, no disrespect to them, but they're a little bit older. I don't really know if Steve Cohen wants to bring them back, just given how young this Mets team can still be when you look at Lindor, who's 28, and obviously Mark Vientos is pretty young, and they'll have Luis Angel Acuna Jr. back up. I would potentially bring back Severino because he's age 29, but I just don't see you bringing back Manaea because he's already getting up there in age at 33, or I'm sorry, Manaea's 31, Quintana's 33. Like, what is a contract really? I'm sorry, Manaea isn't a free agent. I made that mistake. I think he has a player option, so I don't really know how that works out, but Quintana's for sure a free agent. You just wonder what the future holds. Manaea is probably going to want some more security.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an outcome where people just see how dominant Minaya was in the postseason, and his player option is only for 13.5 million, less than he's making this year at 14.5. I think there is a genuine, real possibility he declines that player option to try and get, you know, his stuff, the way his stuff comes in from the left side,
Yeah.
it's almost unhittable for a lot of left-handed hitters. Um, and I think there's definitely a real shot where he ends up declining that player option and just becoming a free agent because there will be a definite market for starting pitchers. There's always is. Everyone wants to have adding to their rotation.
Hmm.
But what a year for these Mets, just overall, quickly wrap it up. Just this NLCS kind of did this team a disservice with how many blowouts there were. Like these Mets were always known for just coming back and being resilient and always being in close games. And then this kind of NLCS just fell flat. Like it was like three blowouts by the Dodgers. Even this last game, it was 10-5 and it was 6-1 after 3 innings. And it just looked like once Will Smith hit that second home run, once the second home run hit, I game was done. The
Yeah.
Dodgers had solidified their spot. You could have even get, told me like after that 2-run double by Tommy Edman in the first inning, yeah, uh, the series was over.
Well, I mean, it also took 46 innings for a team to get its first lead change, but like this is why people said the Padres Dodgers series was the real NLCS. Like that was really to determine who was going to the World Series, and that's no disrespect to the Phillies or the Mets, whoever would have came out of that series. But I mean, let's be real. The Dodgers and the Padres are the two best teams in the National League. They are the powerhouses, and the Mets and the Phillies, the Mets struggled in the entire second half of the year. They were a below 500 team. They had so many flaws in that roster. And the Mets, yeah, they had this miracle run, but everyone was saying, "Oh, well, when the Mets opponent scores first, the Mets are 4-0 because they're the comeback kings." I don't think people realized, yeah, the Mets were first in comeback wins. The Dodgers were second in comeback wins. It's not like this Dodgers team also wasn't familiar with coming back in games. And the one issue that the Mets had that we said in the beginning of before the series started that ended up proving to be true is if the Mets couldn't hit the Dodgers starting pitching, it was good night because they hadn't faced a bullpen that was that dominant and that lethal. And that proved to be true because as soon as the Dodgers made it 6-1, although Vientos hits that home run to make it 6-3, you still felt like the Dodgers bullpen, who was not very good yesterday, they definitely needed these extra days of rest, but they still were unhittable. And that was the problem with these Mets, is that they couldn't attack the starters.
Yeah, I guess it's really like, that Mets team, we knew I mean, we previously talked about it. We knew their issue. It was starting pitching. And even if that Dodgers bullpen was still lethal enough to get them the series win, and Uh, moving on, I guess we'll talk about another team that was supposed to have a lethal bullpen, the Cleveland Guardians,
Yeah.
where Emmanuel Clase went from probably Cy Young runner-up to what happened to you, big bro? Like a 9 ERA in 8 innings pitched in the postseason is insane for somebody that was literally unhittable in the regular season. His cutter inside on righties was unhittable, and we talked about it before where overusing that bullpen gives these players a look. gives them live at bats against this guy. It's a lot different watching footage and seeing how it moves compared to actually being up there. And if you keep going out there, eventually they'll notice it. Eventually, hitters will start to realize. But we talk about, the Guardians had some real good chances throughout this series, and it just seemed like costly defensive errors and pitching struggles at the worst times were just what really done them in. That last at bat, or in game five, where Giancarlo Stanton wasn't getting a pitch at all in the zone,
Yeah.
and then ended up getting one center cut that he said that really just made the series in my eyes. That top of the sixth inning home run for Giancarlo really just I knew that the series was done after he hit that. And then I wasn't expecting Juan Soto to hit that. I thought it was going to be a fly out when he
The
hit it in
Hunter
the 10th inning.
Gaddis.
Yeah.
Oh,
I saw it off the bat and I didn't see Soto's like immediate reaction. I thought it was just going to be a fly ball and then just kept carrying and carrying.
no, I mean, if we want to talk about that at bat real quick before we get into Emmanuel Clase, like Hunter Gaddis has been incredible throughout this entire season. I thought he should have been an all-star over Clay Holmes, and I don't know how Clay Holmes was an all-star, but get like credit to Soto and also just, I mean, Gaddis was really working him, but you could tell in that at bat, and I don't know if you watched it, but you could just tell that Soto was literally waiting for the fastball. He was waiting for the heater because he was just getting on the changeup, but the fastball, the way obviously like a changeup, the way it moves, if you get just a bit on it, you'll foul it back. You could tell he was waiting for the fastball, and as soon as he got the fastball, he crushed it to center field. And I mean, that maybe added a couple more million onto what's already going to be a very high payroll. But you look at Emmanuel Clase in his career, and during the regular season, in 312 innings, he has a 1.67 ERA. In 14 innings in the postseason, he has a 5.14 ERA. This is who Emmanuel Clase is, and everyone's like trying to compare him to Mariano Rivera and all that. That's just disrespectful to Mariano Rivera because Mariano Rivera gave up like 2 home runs in his postseason career, and Emmanuel Clase did that on back-to-back hitters. So let's cut the brakes on Emmanuel Clase being as good as Mariano Rivera because the stats don't lie, numbers don't lie. And I think what was really telling about Clase's headspace was when he goes on Instagram after he blew the game. What game was it that he blew? Did he blow? He blew game four. He blew game four to give the Yankees that 3-1 series lead. And he's like posting on Instagram all his trophies and all these rings and stuff that he's won. It's like, dude, we know how good you are in the regular season, but if you're a poo-poo in the postseason, fans have a right to, say how they feel. And I think it was just telling that he was not in the right headspace and not in the right mind space when you're going on Instagram showing that off. Like you need to go zero dark 30 in the postseason.
I mean, yeah, I've seen a post making fun of Emmanuel Clase for doing that, saying bro's posting Chuck E. Cheese rings. Like
Yeah. Like
like
no one cares.
regular season accolades do not match up to postseason accolades. You can't just say, "Oh, I won MLB Player of the Month in May."
Yeah.
Okay,
Like
what
no
does that
one
have to do with
cares.
how you're doing in October? Like, but
I mean, no one cares. But this was like your point about overusage. Like this is why no one thought the Guardians were going to make it to the ALCS. Like their starting pitching is not that good. And they had Matthew Boyd, who is like decent, but that's not someone who you're trying to roll out like in a game two or a game one. Like he's like a solid game three, game four starter. And then, obviously with Shane Bieber out and Tristan McKenzie just not being good, Tanner Bybee was solid, but then obviously gave up the home run to Stanton to erase a 2-0 lead. The Guardian, and then, Alex Cobb coming back from injury after getting traded from the Giants to the Guardians, they just like they don't have starting pitching, but they also don't have a good enough payroll to really compete.
yeah, and obviously with their free agency coming up, Shane Bieber is a free agent, and that was a really big injury for them, losing him earlier in the year. And then you also had the struggles of Tristan McKenzie, where if you go back to 2022, like these guys were huge for them in the postseason, where
Hmm.
having these starting pitchers and the fall off of Tristan McKenzie needs to be studied, where he went from a 2.96 ERA in 2022 and really being looked at as a future ace for this team to
Hmm.
now being in the minor leagues. And he's only 27. Like, it's an insane loss for them where that would have really helped them in this postseason. A
Hmm.
starting pitcher that could actually take up most of the innings instead
Hmm.
of uh going 3 innings or 4 2/3 all the time, or even less, or 2 innings with Tanner Bybee or anyone else. And that was a really big issue for them. And that's why it led to that overusage of the bullpen, where the Yankees keep seeing these relievers. And eventually they just they zeroed in on a pitch and that they wanted to hit. And that's
Hmm.
what ended up costing them the series.
Yeah, and look, who knows, what the future holds for this team. I think they do have a bright future, obviously with Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, Kyle Manzardo, Big Christmas. You have Stephen Kwan and Lane Thomas, like, and you're in like a oh my God, mediocre, pretty mediocre division in the AL Central. I mean, obviously the Royals woke up. We'll see what they do in free agency, but I still feel like the AL Central is a toss-up. And I just think if the Guardians can go out and, there's so many starting pitchers that are going to be available on the market to them. I like you can attack free agency and you have a solid lineup already. Maybe you add a piece here or there. But you have a solid foundation as well. Brian Rocchio. You got guys that can really perform. They just need better starting pitching to offset the bullpen.
Yeah, and that's really the big thing about it. They just need somebody to really take those innings and let the bullpen rest and give the bullpen days off instead of working Hunter Gaddis, Emmanuel Clase, uh,
Kate
and
Smith.
Cade Smith and everyone else working them multiple days in a row.
Hmm.
It's it just really isn't a recipe for success. But
Hmm.
I guess now moving on, we can talk about the actual World Series matchup between the Yankees and the Dodgers. And you're lucky that the Dodgers ended up winning because they're the only team that I can believe that actually could beat the Yankees right now. I think if the Mets had moved on and somehow beat the Dodgers, I didn't think there was a way that any team would beat the Yankees just because of how light their schedule was. And now we have Garrett Cole going up against is it Yamamoto starting game one?
People are saying Flaherty, people are saying Yamamoto. My guess it would be Yamamoto, but uh I mean, now that they've had just so many days off, like you never know. Maybe you go Flaherty because like of Yamamoto needing the specific days of rest, but it's going to be one of Flaherty or Yamamoto.
Yeah. But yeah, that's looking to be a great first game of the series. Hopefully it's Yamamoto just so it could be, kind of revenge against that. Not revenge, but the team that was also in the running to sign Yamamoto and
Mhm.
overall didn't because they didn't want to pay more than they were already paying for Garrett Cole. They didn't
Mhm.
want to show up him. But now that could be a really interesting start for first game of the World Series. And man, my hate for the Yankees is overriding my hate for seeing the Dodgers win. Because I wouldn't be able to stand it seeing the Yankees win a World Series. I need the Dodgers to somehow clutch up and just win this one time. The one time I'm cheering for them, I need them to win.
Yeah, and you talk about the Dodgers, we could even, want to go back to NLCS recap because, obviously want to just highlight the teams first that are now going home. But I mean, Tommy Tanks Edman hitting in the 4 spot, NLCS MVP. I mean, if you told me before the NLCS that a roster that includes all of these names that Tommy Tanks Edman would win the NLCS MVP after hitting 407 with an OPS above 1,000 and 11 RBIs in the series after having just one against the Padres. Just incredible work by Andrew Friedman. And the entire scouting department to trade Miguel Vargas and a couple, boxes of cookies for Tommy Edman and Michael Kopech, and it's really paid off. Um, look, my unbiased but slightly biased. I'm taking the Dodgers in six. I'm taking the Dodgers in six. I just look, obviously the Cleveland Guardians pitching staff is really, really good. But right now, I think what we've seen is that offense better, I'd rather have better offense than better pitching. And I think the Guardians made that clear in their series against the Yankees, where right now the Dodgers in the postseason are averaging over 6 runs per game, and the Yankees are hovering around 3.5 runs per game. I just think the offense right now, the way it's clicking for the Dodgers, can override the pitching of the Yankees. And, both of these teams are very evenly matched. But when now you already have to work for the Dodgers, you already have to worry about Ohtani, you have to worry about Betts. I don't know what's going on with Freeman. I don't know if he's going to play. The Dodgers are 3-0 without him. The offense looks a lot better when he's not on the field. But nonetheless, you would have Betts, Ohtani, Hernandez, Muncy to worry about. And then you also have guys like Will Smith batting eighth yesterday, Tommy Tanks in the cleanup spot. Winning the NLDS, I think, took a lot of uh, pressure off the shoulders of the Dodgers, because I think I believe that they believe that if they could have got past the Padres, there's no one else. Like, there's no one that they can't beat. And yes, the Yankees have Soto and Judge and Stanton, and Volpe's hitting really hot at the top of the order, as well as Gleyber Torres. But I think the way that the Dodgers are playing and the fact that they muscled their way through the World Series, and I think it was a tougher road for the Dodgers to get there than it was for the Yankees. I just think, the Dodgers are going to emerge victorious, and the fact that they have home field is a reason why I believe that.
Yeah, and I mean, you just look at this Dodgers lineup, and it's like top to bottom. You talked about it with Freddie Freeman on the bench. Their offense is still electric, and you have Teoscar, Ohtani, Betts, Edman, Will Smith. You have these just back to back to back to back to back, just hitters in the lineup that are going insane. And you know, we talk about it with the Yankees going now. Giancarlo Stanton has been electric this postseason, and it's funny how you go from switching from. It seems like almost him and Aaron Judge have like switched, like how good they've been. Where in the regular season, obviously Aaron Judge is an insane regular season
Hmm.
performer, uh, multiple 50 home run seasons, and then we look at Giancarlo, where in the postseason or in the regular season, he's kind of you know not as good as he used to be, and obviously that's a deal with age and his injury history and just how much he's been dealing through things right recently. But we look at him in the postseason, and he's been incredibly clutch. It seems like every time a big moment comes up for the Yankees, Giancarlo Stanton is at the plate and he delivers. And
Hmm.
you have just that three-headed monster right now of power, where you have Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, and Juan Soto all almost back to back in the lineup, where you have Soto, Judge, and Stanton.
Hmm.
That's an insane back to back to back. And Gleyber Torres sneakily, I think he was reached safe uh on base 8 of the first 9 postseason games so far. He's been on
Yeah.
base as the leadoff man.
Well,
And that's
Muncy clears.
yeah. It's an insane thing to look at, because Gleyber Torres was looked at as, oh, he's going to be gone after this year. He's had a lot of emotional issues during the year. Didn't want to move to third base
Hmm.
with the acquisition of Jazz Chisholm, and it just seemed like, well, what are they going to do with Glaber? And now it seems like, well, now we have to keep him because
Hmm.
just of how good he's been in this postseason,
Hmm.
getting on base, being clutch, getting on base is huge for them. Just to load up, basically not being allowed to walk or pitch around Soto or Judge or Stan, who come all after him. It's been incredibly huge for him to get on base for that Yankees team. And it's an insane thing to look at, where both of these lineups are Goliaths. And it goes to show that all these other teams that don't want to spend money on players
Hmm.
They need to wise up and see that spending money does work. And obviously it works. You get the best talent available.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, I mean, it's the first time since 1981 that the Dodgers and the Yankees are playing in the World Series. Like it's pretty cool uh stuff to see. I just wanted to go back on, talking about obviously when we look at the starting pitching for each side, I mean, it's clear that the Yankees have the advantage here. Neither team is really reluctant to swing at pitches, out of the zone. I think it's fair to say that I would take the Yankees starting pitching, but I would take the Dodgers bullpen. I know the Yankees bullpen has been really, really dominant as well. When you look at guys like Luke Weaver in the back end, Tommy Kahnle, former Dodger legend, just has only thrown changeups this entire postseason, which is just insane that like no one's been able to hit it. Because I mean, what I guess you're waiting on the fastball, but like who cares? He's mainly throwing the changeup. Uh, but it's just interesting to see, how things go. But quick shout out as we go back talking back on the Dodgers. In game five, obviously Flaherty didn't have his best stuff. It was very evident. He only goes 3 innings, 8 hits, 8 earned runs. But I think what people have kind of forgotten about that allowed the Dodgers to throw a bullpen game in game six was Brent Honeywell going 4 and 2/3 and basically finishing off that entire game for the Dodgers, allowing them to have this bullpen game. And I'm curious to see how the bullpen game fares against the Yankees. Is Alex Vesia going to be healthy? There are talks about both him and Gratterall being added back onto the World Series roster after both were left off because of injuries in the championship series roster. And if you have those two at your disposal, I think it just makes it so much easier to throw these bullpen games, which look, I get it's not like the sexiest thing in the world, but what does it matter if the bullpen gives up? I don't see a difference in a bullpen giving up, 3 runs across the 9 innings, whatever it may be, versus a starter going 5 innings, giving up 3 runs, and then the bullpen shutting it down the rest of the way.
Yeah, and we talk about it where this bullpen for both sides really is there's a lot of depth and there's a lot of I mean like the Yankees we look at they added Mark Leiter Jr. to their postseason roster,
Hmm.
and he came up that day and pitched the next game too,
Yeah.
where and he gave them good outings where they have guys on their taxi squad right now that probably weren't thinking well they have to stay ready and they've been throwing in the bullpen probably in their meantime, and Mark Leiter Jr. probably wasn't thinking he would end up being on this Yankees postseason roster, but a lot of these both of these bullpens have guys where they can get added on at any time and provide good outings for them.
Hmm.
Like it is cool to see that these guys both bullpens have such insane depth. Like
Yeah.
it's great to see how deep these teams get into their bullpen and these guys just pitch. They pitch good.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you look at it. You mentioned Mark Leiter Jr., Clay Holmes, Luke Weaver, Tim Hill has been a stud ever since he got waived. The White Sox just have to be in so much moose piss after they waive Tim Hill. He goes to the Yankees after, so with the White Sox has a 5.74 ERA, goes to the Yankees now has a 2.01 ERA in 50 innings. Michael Kopech had like a 5 ERA with the White Sox, gets traded to the Dodgers, and has now become practically unhittable since going to LA. I mean, they got to feel that like both they have one reliever for on each side now, and look, I'm not like I don't want to discredit the Yankees pitching staff. It's really good. The Guardians offense was ranked 22nd during the regular season. Like their offense is not that good. And obviously, Stephen Kwan, Brian Rocchio did an incredible job at the plate, but these aren't power hitters. Like they're just giving up singles to these guys. Like you look at it like Stephen Kwan, I think he batted like I want to say he batted like 450 and he batted 381 in the postseason and he had an 863 OPS. Like usually you see an OPS in the 900s. The only guy that had a 900 OPS was Brian Rocchio. I mean, obviously David Fry, all these guys put up offensive numbers, but the Guardians, how many times did they even put up five or more runs in the postseason? Like I know it was like that clinching game against the Tigers, the game they won against the Yankees, they put up that many runs. But outside of that, I don't really remember when they put up five or more runs in a postseason game.
Uh, Game 4 against the Yankees,
I
where
said that.
they lost 8-6.
Oh, okay, so that's three times.
Yeah. And then there was a game against the Tigers, game 4 against the Tigers, they won 5-4.
Okay, so those are the three times I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So
No, the game against the last game against the Tigers, they won 7-3. Game 4 in Detroit, they won 5-4.
okay, so they put up four. Okay, that's all right. I don't know. I just like you look at the Guardians offense and look, I'm not trying to discredit them. I'm just saying that it's not like it wasn't a very strong offense, and also their defense just bailed out the Yankees, so many times. And I think one thing that's a cause for concern for the Dodgers, I think the cause for concern is the bullpen games that are obviously going to be happening because we've seen them work twice, but we've also seen how one bad stretch and you're kind of in no man's land where Dave Roberts
Yeah.
admittedly punted game two after Landon Knack threw a stinker. But for the Yankees, it's also just their base running issues. The amount of times they got picked off, the broadcaster calling them a bunch of drunks. Um, it's going to be interesting to see, how this World Series gets played out. But I'm excited. The first time my Doyers are back in it since 2020.
So you said you have the Dodgers in 6.
Hmm.
I think it'll be Dodgers in 7. I think it goes all the way the distance, all the way to a
Hmm.
game 7, where because I think, like you said, those bullpen games, I think there is going to be a bullpen game where the Dodgers just don't have it. I
Hmm.
think there's going to be, you can basically pencil in one of those games being a loss, and I think they could end up winning one of the other ones.
Hmm.
But I think it's a real toss-up of a series. I just don't want the Yankees to win. I am praying, I am begging and praying that the Yankees do not end up winning this World Series. I have talked too much crap on the internet about the Yankees to end up
Hmm.
having them, win a World Series.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, the teams only played each other three times during the regular season. The Dodgers took two of the three games, but I mean, they were fairly close. One of the games the Dodgers won in extra innings. The other game, uh, the second game was close up until Teoscar Hernandez hit the grand slam. That's when Teoscar Hernandez had the weekend of his life. I don't think I think he hit like three home runs in that three-game series. He just went absolutely berserk. I'm sure he's happy. Yamamoto had his best outing, but then got hurt because his fastball velo was up like a couple of miles per hour, and people were like, "Whoa, what's up?" And he ended up having the boo-boo. But yeah, I don't think anybody wants the Yankees to win. I'm good without the Yankees winning that series. I'm good with the Dodgers winning.
Yeah. I'd imagine you'd be wearing your Dodgers hat right now, but yeah, like I think the best part for this Dodgers team is having guys who've seen these pitchers before. Like Teoscar has seen Garrett Cole before for multiple years, and Otani's obviously been in the division, or not in the division, in the American League for a long time, for his entire career before this year. And
Hmm.
you get to, he's played against the Yankees multiple times in his career, played against Garrett Cole. There is a real shot where a lot of these Yankees hitters haven't had that much experience besides like Jazz Chisholm, and Juan Soto's had some experience too, but they haven't had as much experience against like Yamamoto.
Hmm.
And it's it's kind of a new look for these guys where hopefully the Dodgers somehow end up pulling away with this. It's showing my bias now. I'm I'm biased where I don't want the Yankees to win at all. But
Yeah, I don't know. I think the one thing that one other thing we could bring up is just how valuable it is. how valuable the trade deadline is, for both teams. When you look at it with the Yankees, they get Jazz Chisholm Jr. from the Miami Marlins, myself included, was just like, yo, what is going on? Like, why are the Yankees targeting Jazz Chisholm? And I guess, even pre-trade deadline, you talk about the trade for Juan Soto. Like the Yankees didn't make the playoffs last year, and then Soto comes in, and him and Judge are just the Bash Bros. And you just see, obviously, you have a lot of homegrown talent with guys like, Anthony Volpe as well as Austin Wells. I believe Luke Weaver is a homegrown guy. I'm pretty sure. Or no, I'm sorry, he's not. He's a journeyman. My apologies. I didn't realize how long he's been in the MLB for. Um, but you just see he wasn't that good before coming to the Yankees. I'm going to consider that homegrown. Um, I'm considering him homegrown talent. But yeah, like you just see the importance of the deadline, especially with a guy like Jazz Chisholm, who's kind of just given a new life to this Yankees team. You see the energy he brings. You see the importance that Tommy Edman and Michael Kopech and even Jack Flaherty. I don't know where this team would be without Jack Flaherty, but and you can make an argument that even where would this team be without Jazz Chisholm's feistiness and his hot start in his Yankees career, where they stole that series against the Phillies right away and then kind of took off ever since.
Yeah, and you talk about just how big Jack Flaherty has been for this Dodgers team, like especially after that injury to Tyler Glasnow. Like the reason the Dodgers are doing these bullpen games is because of the injury to Tyler Glasnow, and that's such a big thing for them because Glasnow would be huge in this series right now. Like
Hmm.
he'd be huge. He would have been huge in every series. But losing a starting pitcher so close to the playoffs is such a like almost a death note for a lot of these teams where we look at it with the Padres and how game 4 against the Dodgers, they had to roll out Dylan Cease on short rest rather
Hmm.
than Joe Musgrove.
Hmm.
And, you know, losing Tyler Glasnow is such a big loss for the Dodgers because having to run out these bullpen games and how they have worked, but they also haven't worked in the same series multiple times. It's going to be a toss up rather than having, we know Glasnow is probably going to go out there and pitch a good 5 innings at least.
Hmm.
Um, it's just these acquisitions that are made at the deadline, even as like the Dodgers needed starting pitching at the deadline, and they ended up getting Tyler Glasnow or ended up getting Jack Flaherty, who has been huge for them this postseason.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, I, don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but don't you think it's kind of I also just I find it kind of interesting that Clayton Kershaw and Tyler Glasnow have the two worst statistical ERAs in the postseason, and the Dodgers managed to make the World Series. I just out of the since the 2020 World Series, obviously it's been a little bit of a down year, down world spiral where they lost to the Padres and then they lost to the Diamondbacks um, in the division series, and they just had really struggled in the postseason since then. And then you look at this year with all the injuries, like I don't think people realize that the Dodgers have an entire starting rotation on the IL. If you like with Glass now, Dustin May, Otani, if you want to include that, Gavin
Tony
Stone,
Tony Gonsolin.
Tony Gonsolin, Emmett Sheehan. Like, I don't think like Emmett Sheehan, hopefully he'll be back next year. I think he will. He missed all of this year, but this is a guy with a 97-mile-per-hour fastball, and he looked really legit in the early stages of his career. And it's just pretty impressive that out of all the teams, like even the 111 win team where we thought nothing could go wrong, where you have Trey Turner at the top of your lineup with Betts and Freeman and all those guys still. And I just, there's something about this team where like the vibe feels different. Like it just feels like a lot more of a gritty team. And just credit to Dave Roberts because I think this is the best postseason he's ever managed.
Yeah, those gritty $1 billion Dodgers,
Dude, those
they
gritty Dodgers, man. Where like the gritty Dodgers. I agree, man. That's music to my that's what I've been saying, man. The gritty Dodgers.
yeah, built on nothing but, homegrown talent. Like everyone's out of that farm system, everyone, those gritty homegrown Tigers.
Yeah, yeah, I'm telling you, they are gritty, man.
But yeah, I think that'll just about do it for this episode of Breaking News Bears. I once again want to thank my co-host Evan Davis, and I once again want to thank you guys, the listeners, for listening to another episode of Breaking News Bears. Hopefully, by the time this next episode comes out, we're gonna have a probably be midway through the World Series by then, and we'll probably have a greater outlook on some things that are going on in the series, big moments. And we'll see you all next time on another episode of Breaking News Bears.